Everybody talks about weight loss, but nobody talks about what comes after. And if you spent time, money, and energy on losing weight, chances are you're going to want to keep it off as well. So how do you actually maintain your weight loss long term when 80% of weight that's lost is regained within 5 years? But let's talk about the forgotten part of almost every weight loss journey, maintenance. And if you're watching this or you're listening to it and you can just hear the dogs breathing in the background, I'm dog sitting this week, hence why there's some puppies in this video. So what actually is maintenance? Well, the goal after you've lost weight is to not regain weight, which is maintenance or maintaining your weight loss. But I think it's really important to recognise that maintenance is a spectrum and that there are a few things that will affect it in the short and long term. Short term, once you've hit your goal weight, when you start eating at your maintenance calories, you'll initially see a little spike on the scales. And this spike is as your muscles fill up with glycogen and water, just as you've got more available in your body, and just down to the fact that you're probably eating more food, which means there's physically more food in your body, therefore you weigh a little bit more. Neither of these are a bad thing, but we will see an initial spike on the scales when you go up to maintenance calories. Now, in the long term, we want weight to be relatively stable. I still consider somewhere between a 2 to 5 kilogram range, depending on how much weight that you've lost, as being maintenance. Just because fluctuations are normal, and as time passes, if you are building more muscle, that muscle can therefore increase your overall weight. But when you've put weight back on, you've not increased in body fat, you've increased in muscle mass, which is a net positive thing for your overall health. Therefore, we don't need to worry about that. That's not the same kind of weight regain as it would be if you just regained it in body fat. I definitely weigh more now than I did at my lightest. For context, I've lost 50 pounds at my most extreme numbers. However, I'm not currently sitting at a 50-pound weight loss. But I know I'm holding onto a hell of a lot more muscle than what I was when I was at my leanest. I'm fitter, I'm faster, I'm stronger, and all of those things are positive indicators for my overall health and my overall goals. Therefore, the fact that I weigh a little bit more is not really that important to me. And I would still be happy to say that I have maintained my weight loss. I think the biggest part to highlight here is that weight loss maintenance is a spectrum, and that number will change over time, and that's okay. It just depends on the rest of the context of your life. If that number is going up because you're just regaining fat, then maybe that's something to address. But if that number is going up because you are gaining muscle, then you've got to look at what the bigger picture is actually saying. Remember that weight isn't the only proxy for health, and ultimately I hope you want to be healthier more than you want to be a certain weight. Now let's talk about the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to maintenance. First off, the urge to diet. I cannot tell you how much the urge to diet affected me probably during the first 3 years after I'd lost weight. There would be multiple times where I would get this feeling, I'd just be like, I think I just need to go back to losing weight. I think I'm putting weight back on. There'd be times where I'd be looking at myself in the mirror and I'd have this kind of like perception that I was heavier than I actually was. And it was like it was taking my brain time to actually catch up to my body. But also, dieting was the only goal I'd ever really known within the fitness space. I started dieting age 10, which therefore meant the only real challenge or goals I'd had for myself and my body had been surrounded by fat loss. So when you take fat loss out of the equation, all of a sudden you're left outside of your comfort zone. If we're no longer losing weight, what are we doing? And that urge to diet can be really, really strong. And it's something that I would urge you to be aware of pre-going into that maintenance phase. You're going to get that drive and that focus to go back to dieting because it's all you know. Which leads me on to mistake number 2, not having a goal after weight loss. Think back to your why that's not just, I would like to weigh less. It might have been that you wanted to get healthier. It might have been that you wanted to get fitter. It might have been that you wanted to be able to get down on the floor and play with the kids. Whatever your why was, is there a new goal that we can attach to that or even build on? If you're actually at a place where you are healthier, fitter, you're able to get up and down and play with the kids, what goal can we work towards next? But having a goal to work towards is going to help you stay a lot more motivated now that you're not going to be getting those instant dopamine hits every time that the scale drops. If we're not having that feedback, we need to have something else to work towards. For me, I found that running works best. I've tried to have gym-based goals and they just don't slap the same as what having a running-based goal does for me. So I've pushed myself in terms of distance, I've pushed myself in terms of speed. I've set myself challenges to complete X amount of kilometers within a year. I do have a workout goal that I've done for the last 3 years now where I aim to do 200 workouts within the year. But these are all things that keep me motivated to stay consistent with the habits of a weight loss maintainer. Now, the next mistake comes from if you've done an aggressive diet. Most people, when they've done an aggressive diet, are looking forward to going back to normal. They have willpowered their way through the aggressive diet, and then they get stuck in this place where they're like, well, I want to go back to the behaviors, but the behaviors that I was doing before got me to the weight that I was at before. And they end up almost like rebounding into old habits because they've not fundamentally changed their behaviors. So aggressive diets are fine to do if you are changing your behavior, but for the most part, you're not. So for me, this is a really good argument for you to focus on making sustainable change from day one. I know whenever I work with people, the goal is for us to start making change and building the habits of a weight loss maintainer from day one. We're not thinking about maintenance when we get to maintenance, we're thinking about that from the day we start to make change. And the final mistake that I see people making when it comes to maintenance is not understanding that maintenance changes. The calorie number that you are eating based on your current maintenance will change over time as your seasons of life change or as your life demands change. Say you break your leg, you're not going to be moving around as much, which therefore means that your calorie expenditure is going to go down if you were doing 10,000 steps per day. On the flip side, if you start training for a marathon, your calorie expenditure is going to go up, and therefore your maintenance needs are going to change. So I think it's really important to consider what's going on within your life and are your maintenance needs being met currently. And just to acknowledge here, I have made all of these mistakes. I have done aggressive diets and therefore not been able to keep the weight off because I didn't make a behavior change. I have had that urge to diet even though I'm at maintenance because that's the only thing that I knew how to do. I have lived through all of these things, but building awareness around them is how I actually started to make long-term change. And ultimately, that's why I make content like this, because I want you to be able to learn from my mistakes because I didn't have anybody sharing this kind of content when I was losing weight. So I want you to see that weight loss can be sustainable and how you can do it in a sustainable way and build the habits of a weight loss maintainer. So if you do want to see more of this type of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button because I want your journey to be easier than mine. Now let's get into the habits of a weight loss maintainer. These are the kinds of habits that you're going to want to build probably from day one if you can, but if not, from now at least, so that you can become a long-term weight loss maintainer. There are 4 key areas. Let's start off by talking about nutrition. First off, you want to be eating in roughly the same structure every single day. This is going to make food repeatable and predictable. It means that you're not going to have to make as many decisions around food, and it's just going to make sure that you know that you're going to have to be figuring out breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I like the rough structure of 3 meals and 1 to 2 snacks. Now, if you're in a fat loss phase, generally I recommend 3 meals and 1 snack. However, if you're in maintenance and depending on the level of activity that you do, 1 to 2 snacks might be more appropriate. But again, that's where context is king. But having that repeatable structure is what's going to make weight loss maintenance a hell of a lot easier. The next habit is having as little variation as possible between the weekdays and the weekends. Or if you do have variation, make sure that you have a structure that works on weekends. You can't just be pressing the big red button every weekend. Again, the more predictable you can make it, the fewer food choices and the fewer decisions you're having to make, which therefore means you're more likely to actually stick to your nutrition goals. And finally, for the nutrition section, I think just fundamentally understanding what foods keep you full. So thinking about how you can get foods like protein and fiber onto your plate, because these are foods that keep you fuller for longer. And if you're anything like me and you're someone who struggles with food noise, then you'll know that protein and fiber make the biggest difference to your day and the amount of time you are spending thinking about food. And the less time I spend thinking about food, the better decisions I make around food. Now let's talk about lifestyle. Getting enough sleep is one of the most underrated things that you can possibly do for your health. Making sure that you're getting in over 7 hours of sleep will make a huge difference. One, from the food perspective, you will be getting fewer cravings. Your food noise is going to increase if you have not slept because your body's going to want to get energy from somewhere. You're also not going to be able to recover as well, so you're going to be finding that you're tired and therefore your body is going to again be searching for energy. So making sure that you're getting in enough sleep is so important for your overall health, but it makes everything else that little bit easier. Next, it's really important to think about hydration and thirst. Your body can often confuse being thirsty and being hungry. I know mine definitely does. So whenever I start to get the urge to eat something, I ask myself, am I actually thirsty? When was the last time that I had a drink? And usually the answer is, oh, actually it was too long ago. So that's when I need to actually make sure that I'm having enough to drink, and making sure that you stay hydrated is one of the really easy ways that you can actually make sure that you don't end up overeating. Now, depending on what your activity levels are, will depend on how much you need to drink across the day. I would say I am a very active person, which therefore means I aim for 3 litres per day. You might need 2.5, you might need 2, but the main goal is to be getting in ample water so that you're not confusing hunger and thirst, and your body can function optimally. Next up, mindset. Now, I think these are the habits that can come across sometimes as a little bit wishy-washy, but are actually really important and are probably some of the most important habits on this list. The first one is having a flexible mindset. That means when things don't go to plan, you're able to not just press that big red button, you're able to actually cope with it. The strategy that I use for this is called the next best thing. So basically, when you can't be perfect, what's the next best thing that you can do? So things don't go to plan. All right, what are we going gonna do instead. The next mindset that I think is really important is resilience, or rather bounce back ability. So if you do end up falling quote unquote off track, how are you gonna get back on track as quickly as possible? How can we improve your speed to return? The less time you spend off track, the more time you spend on track, and the more progress that you make. And this is particularly important at maintenance because you're not gonna be in a calorie deficit, which therefore means that the question isn't, are you gonna be losing weight or are you gonna be maintaining weight? Which means it's a lot easier to end up in a calorie surplus when we're currently at maintenance calories because we don't have that calorie deficit to kind of eat back. Therefore, I would argue that speed to return is a skill that's really important to develop during the fat loss phase because it can be super useful in the maintenance phase. Finally, for this section, self-monitoring and self-correcting. This is where you're aware of what's going on and making adjustments based off of what your body is doing. Now, whenever you look at the literature for weight loss maintenance, they will always talk about how weight loss maintainers are able to be aware of where their body's at and then self-correct if their weight starts to creep up again. And I think this is why it's important of having a spectrum. If you hit over that number that you're kind of comfortable with being over, then that's when you then start to make changes. It might be that you go into a small deficit. It might be just that you start to tighten up your habits and just double check that you're doing the things that you think that you're doing.
I've never been more shocked.
But again, I think this is really important to think about the context of your life. Right now, I am at the upper end of my maintenance spectrum. However, I am training for an ultramarathon. If I decided to go into a calorie deficit because I was at the top end of my maintenance spectrum in order to lose weight, I would be at a high risk of injury and doing damage to my bones and muscles because I'm currently training for such long distances. And when you are underfueled in these situations, your risk of injury is much higher. Therefore, even though I am at the top end of where my maintenance spectrum would be, it would be overall detrimental to my health for me to go into a fat loss phase right now. So this is where it's really important to know the context of your life and know why you are at the place that you are at. And yes, self-monitoring is a really important habit to have, and making those changes and being proactive about this kind of thing is super important. However, the context of your life should always help you make these decisions. And finally, onto exercise. Now, in general, whenever you look at weight loss maintenance literature, they will talk about how people exercise every single day. But it's important to recognize that exercising every single day doesn't mean going to the gym every single day or running every single day. It means moving your body every single day. So that can count as your steps as well. So I've broken this down into my general recommendations because the general recommendations are that you would do over 60 minutes of exercise per day. I personally think that most people should be aiming for over 8,000 steps per day, as this is where you're getting the majority of the health benefits from walking. It's a super realistic target. Even if you work in an office, you've just got to make a conscious effort to get out and walk at least once or twice a day. I also think that you should be lifting weights / strength training once to twice per week. This is really important for building muscle mass and protecting bone density. Two things that will be hugely important later in life. Now, if you have been making a sustainable change within your diet, you're probably already doing this. So these are just habits that you're going to continue to do even into maintenance. However, if you can make sure that you're strength training once to twice per week or more, you're going to be in a really good body for protecting your muscles and bones. Not only that, but the more lean mass that you have, the more calories that you will burn at rest. Because muscle mass is more expensive to keep around than fat mass. So the more muscle that you have, the more calories that you burn just by existing. So from a maintenance perspective, it means that you're going to be burning more calories day to day, which makes it a lot easier to maintain your weight. For me, losing weight was one of the best things that I ever did for myself. It means that I'm in a body that I actually feel strong in. It can do what I want it to do when I want it to do it. And I never feel limited by my fitness, my size, or my energy. Things that I did feel when I was heavier. And because I have built the habits of a weight loss maintainer, it's meant that I've actually been able to keep this off long term. I started my fat loss journey in 2019. At the time of recording, it's 2026. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think that's incredibly impressive considering that 80% of weight that's lost is regained within 5 years. So we're doing all right, you know? So if you're on your weight loss journey or you're finishing up your weight loss journey and moving into maintenance, make sure you build these habits of a weight loss maintainer, and hopefully you don't make the same mistakes that I did. So if you've enjoyed this video and you want to keep hanging out, then make sure you check out this video next where I talk about how I've reduced my cravings.